America, bonjour, hi, Canada. Will somebody in Washington, D.C. please ask somebody in a position to know whether the searches of Joe Biden's homes are in response to a grand jury proceeding or subpoena, whether or not is a grand jury directed at the president, Dr. Jill Biden, or the entity that owns the houses like the Joe Biden Family Trust or anything like that. Is there a grand jury subpoena behind this? I'm now officially convinced that there's a legacy media blind spot, bias, idiocy. I don't know, but somebody's got to ask the question. This looks like a grand jury subpoena. It smells like a grand jury subpoena, and it walks with an FBI jacket like a grand jury subpoena. And is there a grand jury subpoena of any sort that triggered these raids, these searches of, it's not a raid because there's no warrant. The FBI is not treating Joe Biden like it treated Donald Trump. And mind you, Donald Trump cooperated some, he didn't cooperate completely, and he got hit with an FBI search. This is the fourth time around the block for the FBI documents. Fourth time for the Biden documents. And now we've got classified documents back to his Senate day. So he's been obviously a serial abuser for years. Tim Kaine, senator from Virginia, was on Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan and said this, cut number 9.
Senator, yesterday for the fifth time, we learned about this other tranche of classified information being kept at the president's personal residence. How does a senator accidentally take classified material home?
Margaret, I don't really know the answer to that question because I review classified material as a senator on the Armed Services and Foreign Relations committees. But when I do it, it's always in a classified facility where I don't have access to the materials other than to sit there and read them. So that's why there needs to be this independent investigation, an independent prosecutor. How many documents are we talking about? Dozens, a handful, or hundreds? How serious are they? Why were they taken? Did anyone have access to them?
Tim Kaine is asking the right questions. Margaret ought to have followed up. Do you think there's a grand jury investigation involved here? Because the last story I saw on the Hunter Biden grand jury, which is sitting, it's open. It's looking into Hunter Biden's, a number of things about Hunter Biden's laptop, his accounts, his conflict of interest. They've been sitting for at least since October. Not Dylan Byers, who was it? I'll think of their name, over at the Post, wrote a piece in October. It's the last thing I've seen about the Hunter Biden grand jury, and this just feels like it. Let me get to the other news, if I can, for you. It's a terrible massacre in Monterey Park, which I go to maybe every 5 years. I pass through it on my ramblings around Southern California. The killer on the Lunar New Year was a 72-year-old, sounds like a Vietnamese man. His name is Hugh Tran. And he went to the Monterey Park dance studio from Hemet. Then he was going to go drive up another dance studio. They stopped him at the door, grabbed whatever weapon he was carrying. Two people did, two citizens, two good Samaritans. And he got into a white van, drove away, and he killed himself. So we obviously don't know anything about this. It triggered the usual mass shootings are terrible, and of course they are. But don't tell me what you are going to deplore until you tell me how you stop a 72-year-old man from getting a handgun and walking into a dance studio. It's not by the Second Amendment issues. There are logistics issues. I don't know where he got the gun from. You might be able to find who sold him the gun and prosecute them. It was in violation of any applicable law. California's got a lot of gun laws. 10 people dead, 10 wounded, 3 are released, 7 are still in the hospital. This one is not like Chesapeake, Virginia, the Walmart. It's not like the Colorado Springs shooting at the LGBTQ nightclub. It's not like the Charlottesville, Virginia bus. It's not like any other one. Not like the 4th of July parade shoot up. Not an angry young man. It's a 72-year-old, apparently Vietnamese man who liked to dance or had a domestic dispute going on or a dispute with, maybe no one would dance with him. Honestly, I don't know, but neither do you. I listened to the most painful press conference last night to prepare for the show. One of the press conferences where they gather everyone together into a room and they all say how great the cooperation's been, and they don't tell you anything. Not a lick, because they don't know yet. And I don't blame them, but I wouldn't hold a press conference if you don't know it. Other news. The fourth tranche of string of classified document discoveries seen tarnishing White House. I'll be talking about that on the Grand Old Pod later today. Other headlines: U.S. authorities find more classified documents at Biden home. Justice Department search of Biden home in Wilmington turns up more documents. That one's from the Washington Post. This one from Fox. DOJ seizes more classified docs from the Biden Wilmington home after 12-hour FBI search. It's everywhere. Everyone knows about it. Nobody asked a single question of anyone on the Sunday shows or in legacy media or in any of the posts, the New York Times, Wall Street Journal. Is this connected to the grand jury sitting on Hunter Biden? I don't know. Then the answer is, did the president or anyone connected with the president receive a subpoena from the grand jury that obliged them to search for documents at Wilmington, at Rehoboth, and at whatever storage facility you maintain for the Bidens and any entity connected with the former president? Because I assume the house was not held in Joe Biden's name or Joe Biden's name. I assume it could be the XYZ Trust. Ditto the Rehoboth house. It's all trusted up. It's a lot of money. So you got to ask, did the grand jury, it's a site identified in a search warrant, and they got it from the grand jury, and they served it, and they're not normally accompanied by raids, right? They're just not. That's what you do for Donald Trump because you're a Republican and you're a Democrat left-wing archivist and a Democrat left-wing attorney general, so you protect Biden, you go after Trump. But that's what happened. Here's another thing. Debt ceiling looms over Capitol as Congress returns to work. It is not looming over the Capitol. We don't have a hard debt ceiling until June or July. It is being framed by the legacy media. This week, the RNC is going to reelect Ronna McDaniel as their chairwoman on Friday. And then they're going to put out the debate rules. I would go back into the committee and make a rule and add it. We are going to watch the debt limit coverage, and we are not going to give any participation awards or plans to any network that does not cover the debt ceiling story fairly, meaning that President Biden has refused to negotiate over that which his predecessor, Joe Biden, negotiated when the House was flipped in 2010. Barack Obama negotiated in 2011 on the debt limit. Exact same circumstances, though I hate when people say exact same, it's a Steelers giveaway, but it is the exact circumstances. And the redundant people say the exact same, completely the same. I mean, really, they're absolutely four-quarters same circumstances, which is classified material that ought not to be at a private residence, is at a private residence. Joe Biden is looking for it. Why is he looking for it? Is a grand jury subpoena there? But we cannot get it done, and we cannot get the debt limit covered by the legacy media in a remotely fair way. So I'm asking you, please be aware, if you're a White House correspondent. Is there a grand jury proceeding that triggered this? Did the president receive a subpoena, or did any member of his family or entity that he controls or is connected with receive a subpoena such that it triggered these searches? And the debt limit. Is the president following the Obama precedent? Are you broadcasting the fact that he is not? Because I've really had it. Ron Klain is stepping down at the White House. That's not big news. I mean, it's big news in the White House, but it's not big news for the country. There are like at least 2 chiefs of staff per term. Donald Trump had 4. Hardest job in the world. Ron Klain, I don't agree with much he did, but he's a good, competent man. He's just a lefty. He's wrong, not rotten. Jeff Zients, who is the COVID coordinator, is taking over for the next 2 years. There is a COVID flu RSV numbers kept, and people were worried about when it was a silly season. The triple-demic, it faded, didn't happen. A teacher shortage so severe, so acute, that students are expected to learn without one. This is in the Washington Post this morning, and it's a story about how some school districts in the United States cannot get teachers. Well, first thing you do is waive your credentialing. Okay, first thing you do is say, we're not going to require that you've gone to education school because we don't need you necessarily to have wasted a lot of time in college. Look, there's some education classes that are fine. I think it's kind of routine for people to go sit through the indoctrination that is a master's in education so that they can teach or to get a credential. It's indoctrination. And that's all it is. It's just indoctrination. But if there's a teacher shortage, start handing out emergency credentials to any member of the United States military who was an officer, went to OCS, has led a small unit, and was discharged with an honorable discharge. Because they're competent to lead a classroom. You might have to teach them how to teach a little bit, how to do a lesson plan, but they're competent to lead. Let them come and you don't have to credential anybody. And put out, there is no national billboard, we need teachers here. With the salaries listed, they're not serious until they do that. I'm going to come back to that because I'm tired of this teacher shortage stuff. Show me a national billboard with the salary listed, the benefits listed, the date you start, the classes available, how much you have to work. And by the way, Here's how we get an emergency credential to you. I do not believe there's a shortage until anyone shows me such a bulletin board. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. My friend Salena Zito joins us this morning. Good morning, Salena. How are you?
Good morning, sunshine. How are you?
I am terrific. I told everyone last week's grand old pod that you did has been much in demand, and the Pennsylvania Republican Party asked for it, and we wouldn't give it to them for free. They have to join the universe if they want to hear Salena Zito on organizing a party. But today they can go and read your new column. I want to talk about it. You know, when you wrote, Brad Todd and you co-authored The Great Revolt in 2017, right?
2018. It was
2018.
We wrote it in 2017, 2018 it was published because that's how books go.
And it was a great bestseller, The Great Revolt. I think you ought to now go to Brad and say, we need to write The Great Parent Revolt, because your column on what parents want is 100% on target. It's happening everywhere, and the legacy media is not covering it. What do you see going on, Salena, and what did you write about?
Well, you know, you saw the breakdown in the relationship between parents and school systems. Obviously at the beginning of the pandemic, when schools were shut down, and several layers of things started to happen. Parents started to, you know, they're home with their kids, they're right beside their kids, often they're working right beside their kids. All of a sudden, they're looking over at their kids and saying, wait, what? That's what you're learning in school? This is part of the curriculum? This is what they're emphasizing? How did I not know this? And these were things outside the important parts of schooling, which is reading, writing, and arithmetic. And then that relationship became further strained when they realized how political the school unions were, the teachers' unions were, and how much control they had onto whether your children went to school or not. They almost were dictated right from the political part, the Democratic Party. And so that relationship is forever changed. You saw a massive movement, and I mean massive movement, of parents out of school districts and into homeschooling, and or out of public schools and into private schools, parochial schools. And you haven't seen that movement back. In fact, parents are even more sort of dug in on changing the way school districts educate your children, from the complete emphasis on getting into universities to more of an emphasis into practical talents, things that you and I, when we went to school, was called
typing in the 9th grade. That's what I took in the ninth, typing.
Yeah, and typing and budgeting and home ec.
Yeah. But I got to ask Salena, I also think they're anti-indoctrination, that they are really, really upset with woke. And the Ron DeSantis Florida School Department taking aim at the new AP Black History course is, I think, a winner for every Republican, because my guess is that course is very ideological. That they laid it out, and parents don't want ideology. They don't want it. Left, right, or center. They want the facts.
Right, exactly. They want their children to have the same robust education that they had, and that was sans politics, right? You saw it started to sort of creep into American teaching at about the year 2001, and it has slowly become part of the curriculum. I saw it with my own children, and my children were smart enough to push back against that. But you know, I think it's a sea change. You even saw in school board elections, not just in Virginia, but also in suburban Philadelphia, in counties like Delaware, Chester, Montgomery, where parents pushed back and different members in school boards flipped away from these sort of activist school board members to concerned parents who just want to make sure the curriculum is centered on education and not on this woke ideology.
And I got to tell you, the canary in the coal mine story is this Northern Virginia series of school districts suppressing the PSATs in order to hide the highest achieving academic students. I think the great parent revolt is any chance I've talked you into thinking about writing another book. Books are a pain in the neck. You actually don't need to write any more books, but the great parent revolt would be welcome. Corey DeAngelis would welcome it, Salena. What do you think?
Yeah. Absolutely. It's certainly something that we've been considering for sure, because you know, when there is a sea change, when there are new coalitions formed and people aren't seeing them, it's important to bring them to light and see how they change our culture.
And education is upstream of almost everything. I mean, if
Yep.
you're starting at K through 12, it's upstream of culture. It's upstream of politics. It's upstream of everything, and they don't want the water poisoned. It's a great column, Salena Zito. I tweeted out salenazito.com, but I would encourage all of you to go and find DC Examiner Salena Zito. It's her brand new column. Salena, as always, thank you. Have a wonderful morning. You always make my Monday so bright, even though she is a Steelers fan and like me, sitting on the sidelines as the Bengals roll along. Thank you, Salena. Talk to you next week. Don't go anywhere, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show. Sherman of Punchbowl News. Good morning, Jake. How are you?
I'm well, Hugh. How are you?
I am terrific. Jake, I want to begin with a question about questions. I have not heard anyone ask Karine Jean-Pierre or Ron Klein, who you report in Punchbowl News is leaving to be replaced by Jeff Zients, or the president or the vice president, were the searches of the Biden properties in Delaware and possibly elsewhere triggered by a grand jury request, subpoena, or proceeding connected to Hunter Biden. Have you heard anybody ask that?
No, I've not.
Because it's the obvious, something precipitated these searches. They've gone back 4 times. The reason the FBI finally got involved, I think, is because the federal grand jury is saying, are you sure? And what do you think of my theory? Because otherwise, there's no reason to be doing this 4 times.
Excuse me, Hugh. I don't have a specific view on that. I mean, it's a good question to ask. It is interesting. I mean, the other theory could be that they were covering their bases post Trump. But I hear you on that, and that's an interesting thing to ask. It should be asked.
Have you seen any coverage? Again, you're at Capitol Hill primarily. Hunter Biden's going to come up either before the weaponization or the oversight committee, and maybe even the select committee on China. Have you heard anything about when they're going to call Hunter Biden to any of these committees?
No, and I think that will be a big issue for Republicans, because I think he could have an out saying he'll appear, but he can't answer any questions.
Yeah, of course.
Pending investigations.
He'll take the fifth.
But that will be right. That will be an interesting moment for House Republicans and for Hunter Biden, because I would imagine, just having covered these for a long time, that they will need to build a case. Meaning, I don't think they're going to shoot their big bullet, so to speak, at the front end. I think they're going to have to build a case. But maybe they do. Maybe they do. Maybe they call him immediately. But I just don't.
So I'd subpoena him tomorrow, because he's not going to answer anything. And he's not going to ever answer anything, nor should he, by the way. I just would do what the 9/11 Nancy Pelosi committee did, which is set people up to look bad and just turnabout. Now let's talk about the Select Committee on Intelligence. The Permanent Select Committee, I believe it has 17 members, 10 in the majority, 7 in the minority. Hakeem Jeffries, the Democrat, sent his list of his 7 over to Kevin McCarthy. It included Adam Schiff and Eric Swalwell. First, a factual question. Was Adam Swalwell, to the best of your knowledge, sleeping with Fang Fang, the Chinese Communist Party agent?
Eric Swalwell, and I have no idea. I don't think he's ever answered that when he's been asked. I have no firsthand knowledge, nor I don't think that he has conceded or he has said anything about the potential for the potential of any relationship one way or the other.
Have you heard what I have heard, that is the problem? She slept with him.
I think that's been reported. I think the Axios story said that they had some sort of relationship, and the FBI gave a defensive briefing to the leadership about that when he was put on the committee.
So I've had one defensive briefing in my life, and generally it was, there's an intelligence operation aimed at you by a foreign entity. Thank you. And I was aware of it, and it was a benign thing. It was not a big deal. But from my counterintelligence days at Justice, if you're sleeping with a Chinese Communist Party agent, you should not be on the Select Permanent Committee on Intelligence, period. They know too much about you. So I think Kevin McCarthy wins this round. It's a little bit more difficult with Adam Schiff. We'll come to that. But Eric Swalwell, no way, as Kevin McCarthy said, if he can't get a clearance in the private sector, why would you give him a clearance to the skiff in Congress? What is that a good argument, Jake?
Let me back up. McCarthy has already won the round because it's his choice. This doesn't have to go for a vote on the floor. The Select Committee on Intelligence, Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, is appointed by the Speaker with consultation from the minority leader, the House Democratic leader in this case. So McCarthy can block Schiff and Swalwell without any material repercussions. Now, when I say material, I mean maybe there'll be political repercussions, but there will not be, and I don't think there will be, but there will not be any ability for Jeffries to get them on the committee. Now, yes, the Intelligence Committee does learn things that the regular populace of the Congress does not learn. But that said, he will have a clearance. He will be able to get sensitive, non-public information by dint of being a member of Congress. So
there are, I want to explain that to the audience. TAP, SAC, SCI, top secret information, special compartmented information, and access special programs are sensitive access programs are limited to very few people in Congress. Very few people, like the 17 members of the Senate and the House Intel committees, or maybe 25 total. That's all that get that, Jake. So it's not like a regular clearance like a member of Congress gets.
That is true. And remember, and I'm not even saying remember, I don't know if you know this, but the Intelligence Committee has the ability to travel around the world without a bipartisan congressional delegation, meaning if, I'm just going to say Adam Schiff because he was on the committee, if Adam Schiff wanted to go to, Germany, I'm making up a country, and meet with, the CIA and meet with the intelligence officials in Germany, he would be able to do that without having to put together a bipartisan congressional delegation. That is one of the perks afforded of the Intelligence Committee. You do get, it's not that you're just sitting in a skiff and getting information. You have the ability to do lots of interesting and sensitive things by being on the Intelligence Committee.
Yeah, there is a world out there, and people who are driving to the Pentagon right now know this because they've all got their top secret sets of compartmented information. They're going to go work in a skiff today. There's a world of information that nobody gets to see and that it's illegal to tell you and me about. And the only members of Congress who get that are on the Permanent Select Intelligence Committees in the House and the Senate and the Big Eight, the four leaders of both parties in the House and the Senate. And I got to tell you, I wouldn't let Eric Swalwell near that thing, and I wouldn't let Adam Schiff near that for different reasons. The latter is, in my view, complete liar, but the former is compromise. And Jake, why would Hakeem Jeffries raise this issue? This goes to Hakeem. Does he really think it's a winner to advertise why Eric Swalwell is being blocked from the Select Committee on Intelligence?
I think he's fighting for his members, and I think he thinks that, and to be clear, the FBI has said in news stories that they have cleared Swalwell of any wrongdoing. So whether someone else believes that he's done wrong or that he's compromised, the FBI has said the opposite.
Well, no, they have. I want to make sure they have said he can be on the Select Committee on Intelligence. They have not said that he is not compromised. All right, so they can't. I read this very closely because I know what happens when you end up falling for the honeypot. And if there's any intel professional out there who thinks it's a good idea for a compromised congressman who fell for the honeypot to sit on the Select Committee, call me. Let's talk about the members.
Hold on. Here's what the FBI said, and I'm not taking issue with what you said. What he said was the FBI said Swalwell was completely cooperative and under no suspicion of wrongdoing. It was a defensive briefing. Information was obtained where we do a duty to warn that he may be targeted by a foreign entity. So that was what the FBI said post that incident.
And my understanding is Swalwell slept with Fang Fang. Fang Fang is a Chinese communist spy, and the audience can decide what. And she left the country, and no one knows where she is because the CCP withdrew her. So he may not have done anything wrong in the world of the FBI, meaning that he is a participant in a national security leak. Like Dianne Feinstein didn't do anything wrong when she had a CCP chauffeur. And I didn't do anything wrong when I was targeted by a benign information. I've had defensive briefing. I know it. I don't think he should have slept with Fang Fang, but unless I'm wrong about that, he shouldn't be near the committee. Jake, do we know who McCarthy is putting on new members from the Republican caucus on the Select Committee on Intel?
I don't yet. The two committees that are outstanding at the moment are the Rules Committee, which will be very important, and the Select Committee on Intelligence. We expect those. I'm pushing on this today. Actually, I just got a text message from my colleague, John Bresnahan, saying we need to work on this today and you need to figure this out, which I agree with. So, no, this is something that we're going to be all over today, but I anticipate all the previous members will remain on the committee.
I agree. I think there are three new Republicans coming on, and those are going to be the three smart men and women that Kevin McCarthy trusts with the national information. Schiff's getting tossed. Salvo's getting tossed. Jeffries will have to come up with someone. But I have not seen anyone on the Gallagher Committee or the Jordan Committee yet. Have you?
No, they've not named those people yet. But remember, the Jordan Committee is a subcommittee on judiciary, so we anticipate that committee will be populated mostly with Judiciary Committee members. But I do believe they have the ability to put other people on that panel.
I agree. That's my understanding, is that they can reach outside of the House. I will be watching Punchbowl throughout the day because certainly the Chinese Communist Party is going to be looking for who's on the Gallagher Committee. That's a big deal. It's a very, very big deal. Jake Sherman, always a pleasure. Punchbowlnews.com. If you don't get it in the morning, you're not up to speed. Stay tuned, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt in Studio West, joined by the Smart Guys 2.0. Steve Vladeck teaches at the University of Texas Law School, Con Law. He is a man of the left. Jonathan Adler teaches from Case Western Reserve University Law School in Cleveland. He's a man of the right. They join me. They have the Smart Guys 2.0. Good morning, gentlemen. Thanks for getting up early. Steve, always customary for me to go to the guy who's outnumbered. And I just want your straight up assessment of the GarageGate, as its hashtag is, the Biden documents. What do you think is going on?
Well, I mean, Hugh, I think two different things are true. I think the Biden team has been careless when it comes to making sure that it has returned all of the documents that were in the former vice president, the former senator's possession. I think that carelessness is a symptom of a broader disease where the National Archives has been, I think, insufficiently tight-fisted in its control of documents held by senior officials after they're done being senior officials. And I think efforts to compare it to what former President Trump did are laughable on their face, given that former President Trump first spent 18 months denying that he had any such documents in his possession. Then when asked for those documents and given a subpoena for those documents, misrepresented what was in his possession, and then tried to argue that they actually were his documents and not the government. So I think we can say two things. Biden really was, I think, careless, regardless of what he knew. And his carelessness pales in comparison to what we saw from former President Trump in a very similar, at least outwardly, context.
Professor Jonathan Adler, your take on GarageGate.
Well, at first, I should say we're still learning things. Every time we think we know the extent of what's going on here, suddenly there are more documents. Suddenly there are documents in an additional place. Suddenly there are documents not just from the president's time as vice president, from his time at the Senate. But I agree with Steve that this shows that we don't keep good track of classified documents. I would argue we classify too much. I think it also confirms that senior political officials, unlike people in the military, unlike career folks within the national security establishment, are very careless and tend not to be held to account for their carelessness with classified material. And given statements that the president has made within the past month about how could anyone be this careless and so on when he himself is doing it, I think it highlights that we need to have a lot more accountability here about how this material is handled, how it is kept, and what happens when people don't handle it properly. Because it's not reasonable that a member of the military or a career official in the State Department or NSA or whatever can have their career ruined. But we can make jokes about whether or not the president had a box of documents next to his Corvette.
I got read into top secret Senate Department information in 1984. I've held the highest clearances when I was the counterintelligence special assistant to attorneys general. Quick question, but I'm not a prosecutor. Never prosecuted a case. Have either of you ever held a clearance, and have either of you ever prosecuted a case? I'm just curious. Steve?
I have not held a clearance. I haven't prosecuted the case.
You have not, or you have?
I have not.
Okay, Jonathan, have you?
I've had a clearance. I was an advisor for a trade advisory committee, so I had to have a clearance for that. That had to get renewed every certain number of years, but I have not prosecuted a case.
Okay, so I am wondering, I asked that because this looks weird to me. 4 different trips to the Biden properties, and I keep Trump and Hillary out of this. I'm just focused on this. And I've got a very experienced former AUSA and senior political lawyer at Justice and at the White House telling me this looks like a response to a grand jury subpoena. Do you two think that? No one's asked that. Has the president been subpoenaed? Has Dr. Biden been subpoenaed? Have the owner of the properties in Rehoboth and Wilmington been subpoenaed, whether it's a trust, whatever? Because it sure looks like a response to a subpoena to me. What do you think, Steve?
I don't see any evidence of that. I mean, obviously, I don't see any evidence to conclusively disprove that. But when it comes to a subpoena, I mean, the president's team has said that his compliance has been voluntary, that they were the ones who reached out to DOJ. That's, Hugh, a pretty bold statement to make if they reached out to DOJ only after being served with a grand jury subpoena. I'm sure there are people who don't believe what the White House is saying in this space. I will just say that until there's some evidence that they are lying, not just misrepresenting, here it would be affirmatively lying, I don't think this is a response to a grand jury subpoena. I think, as Jonathan said, this is just a sign that we have for far too long allowed senior officials, whether they be the vice president, whether they be senior members of the U.S. Senate, to really have sort of a lackadaisical approach when it comes to holding on to and not returning classified information. And that's a broader problem that we ought to talk about reforming without just saying, Biden is somehow a unique culprit in this space.
I don't think he's unique at all. I think pretty much every senior official walks away with stuff they shouldn't take. But Jonathan, what about the question? Because it has not been asked and answered. And the way to frame it for Karine Jean-Pierre is, has the president or anyone connected to him, Dr. Biden or any entity controlling this property, has been received a subpoena that touches on there? Do you think that's a fair question to ask? And do you think there is a subpoena here?
I think it's a fair question to ask. I agree with Steve that I think that that's pure speculation at this point. I mean, I would assume at this point, not only are the Bidens folks scouring every property where something could be, I'm assuming the Obama folks are doing that. I'm assuming the Bush folks are doing that. I'm assuming the Pence folks are doing that. I mean, unfortunately, this is the sort of thing that should occur as a matter of course when folks leave office. This is a sort of thing, but we know that as a general matter, we know that President Biden, in a wide range of contexts, has not been the most diligent about activities and relationships and taking care of things in ways that could create an appearance. I mean, as we all know, with all the things related to his son, whether you think there's malfeasance there or not, it's clear that there's been a cavalier attitude about doing things by the book the way they should be done, so such questions cannot even be asked. It should bother us that you can even ask that question and we can't just laugh it off.
Well, I'm trying to put together what explains this fact pattern. I understand, we've got a document, let's go back, look everywhere. I understand screwing up the first search. I understand maybe even screwing up the second search. I don't understand screwing up the third search and then bringing in the FBI for the fourth search. Steve, I mean, isn't that odd?
I mean, yes and no, Hugh. I mean, I think the problem is we also don't know what the internal conversations were like. I mean, so for example, right, there was a report over the weekend that there was a miscommunication between the Penn Biden Center and the sort of the household, the folks who actually have access to the garage, about what they were looking for and when they were looking for it. So, again, I think, I am one of those who thinks it was appropriate for the Attorney General to appoint a special counsel. I think this is the kind of thing where an investigation is by no means like indefensible, but I still think it's, we're jumping to a lot of conclusions to think that this is more than just a combination of the carelessness that I think all three of us agree pervades this class of folks in Washington and what could very easily have just been miscommunication problems. It's possible the special counsel will find more. I will just go on record as saying I think that's unlikely, that this is going to be more than just carelessness compared to the Mar-a-Lago version of the story, which is a very different and much less negligence-driven story. But I just, I think we ought to be careful. The same folks who think that folks were quick to rush to judge former President Trump, it's kind of ironic now if they are now quickly rushing to judge President Biden.
No, I agree with almost everything you said. I'm not rushing to judge President Biden because one page of one document can get people killed. 5,000 pages of idiocy that's classified doesn't get anyone killed. So it depends on what the documents are, what the classification was, and why they were there. I'm just looking at the facts and circumstances around this. So Jonathan Adler, if in fact the Hunter Biden grand jury is standing up, how do we learn about it? The last thing I read about it was a Devlin story in the Washington Post in October, and it's been dark since then. I just don't know anything about how grand juries get leaks out. I mean, John Eastman's grand jury, part of the Smart Guys 1.0, is leaking like a sieve all the time. Why do some grand juries leak and other ones don't?
Well, I think sometimes that's a question of who's on the grand jury. I think more likely it's a question of whether or not the prosecutors want to leak information, because I think typically that's where it's going to come. Or, of course, someone who testifies might be the source. But I think it's a question of who the individuals are. We don't know. I presumably will know when decisions are made. And in the meantime, that leaves lots of room for lots of speculation.
Now, Steve, I want to turn to the special counsel because you brought it up. I've explained again and again, special counsels are different from independent counsels. There's no more independent counsel statute. We're back to special counsels. The best and only good thing about the independent counsel law, I clerked to the 3-judge panel that appointed them in the 80s. They reimbursed every person who ran up a legal bill if they weren't indicted under that law. You don't get reimbursed under the special counsel regulations. How unfair is that?
I mean, there are a lot of things about the special counsel regulations that I think are problematic. But of course, the critical word there is regulations. The Justice Department cannot appropriate funds by itself. And so, I am actually perhaps the last defender of the independent counsel statute. I think there are...
No, I'm number 2. Reforming it would work.
Yes. But I think this is the position that Congress, by allowing the statute to expire in 1999, put the Department of Justice in. And I think, if you go, as recently as 2017, if you look at the hearings that the Senate Judiciary Committee held about the special counsel regulations, I think there are lots of constructive suggestions out there about how to bolster the special counsel regulations, about how to make the process more fair. And I will just say, this is not directed at either of you, but in 2017, it was Senate Republicans who were opposed to those reforms, perhaps by dint of who was then in office.
I don't know what they were. I only know one person who got sidewinded by the Clinton special counsel, and they ran up a 7-figure legal bill, which got reimbursed because Ken Starr was appointed by the Independent Counsel Committee. Completely innocent, completely nothing to do here. But, you can't, Jonathan, let's close up. You can't screw around when a prosecutor knocks on your door, right? You got to lawyer up.
You do. And with either the independent counsel or the special counsel, you have to remember this is a prosecutor that has one target. So they're not going to set your case aside because something else big comes along. They're given this and only this. And that creates a sort of tunnel vision. It creates a sort of, monomaniacal focus on a particular issue without regard for whether or not it's the most important thing. And as I clerked for a judge that oversaw the 3-judge panel as well. And
which one?
Bills were crazy. I'm sorry?
Which I had Roger Robb, and we appointed Jacob Stein to investigate Ed Meese, and he set the land speed record of 6 months for an IC investigation. Who'd you clerk for?
I clerked for Judge Santel, and when I was clerking for him in 2000, we were still seeing requests for reimbursement from years before for people you hadn't even heard of, but who were connected to one of the many Clinton-era independent counsels.
It's just fair, though. Steve Vladeck and Jonathan Adler, I hope you guys both write about the special counsel / independent counsel law, because this is not the way it should work. 3 of them with no clock. Thank you both, professors. I'll be right back, America, on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. El Diablo is blowing in California. The devil winds are back as El Diablo roars through Southern California this morning. I'm joined by something of a devil inside the Beltway himself, Josh Kraushaar, the devil's men of left, right, and women of left, right, because he's fair. Good morning, Josh of Axios. Good to have you.
Good morning, Hugh. Great to wake up to the Rolling Stones in the morning.
It does.
Can't beat that.
Josh, I want to talk about GarageGate. I just asked a couple of law professors. I'm asking everyone. Has anybody asked anyone, Karine Jean-Pierre, Bob Bauer, DOJ, are the searches of the president's homes in response to a grand jury proceeding? Has anyone you heard ask that question?
I haven't heard that specific question asked. I think it will. I mean, this is not going away, as of course you've been discussing with the revelation that there were more documents found in the president's Wilmington home. Again, raising the whole argument of transparency and being above board, making that a moot point. This is the drip grip that doesn't stop gripping, and there is starting to become a trust factor and a credibility factor that's very quickly evaporating with this White House.
What would it do to the president's credibility if, in fact, there was a subpoena back there somewhere?
Well, look, I mean, it would show that the special counsel is definitely operating aggressively and independently, and I think sounds like they're doing their job. I mean, the 13-hour search with the president's permission of the Wilmington house over the weekend. That's a pretty thorough search, and obviously they're leaving no stone unturned. So
Josh, I am not now, nor have I ever been a prosecutor. I was the counterintelligence special assistant at Justice, but I have a former AUSA and senior White House official telling me in my offline communications, boy, this looks like a grand jury response, and Hunter Biden has a grand jury going on, but nobody covers. Devlin Barrett is the only guy I've seen cover the Hunter Biden grand jury. Have you seen anything about it?
I haven't seen anything, but one nugget that I think your listeners would be interested in over the weekend in the Washington Post was that the original Wilmington search found the documents that were found, the 6 documents that were found in the first round of searching, had to do with Iran from the years of the Obama administration. So, I mean, that was buried in the story the Post wrote over the weekend. It is something I think that is also deserving of a lot of follow-up. What were the documents about, and why, that was obviously one of the more contentious parts of the Obama administration when it comes to foreign policy.
Now, Josh, I'm looking for expressions of humility by the media. I tell people I have no idea which is worse, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, or Donald Trump, because I don't know what's in the documents. One page can get people killed, and 1,000 pages might not matter. Is that true?
Well, yeah, I think that point is exactly right. I've been that's the point I think that as pundits we should be aware of. No, as Don Rumsfeld would say, the known unknowns. And there are a lot of known unknowns in the whole, both with Trump and with Biden. Because of all the classification rules, we don't know the different variations of classification. There's you know this better than I do, Hugh. And without knowing what these documents are about, what exactly they're revealing, how sloppy and how reckless it was to have these documents at their respective homes, it's hard to make any grand conclusion. Presumably, that's the job of the special counsel, at least to come up with
and the markings
with the evidence.
The markings don't take confidential, secret, top secret. I'm not going to get too worried about because there's a lot of that. Top secret SCI. Then you start to say, oh, that had special protocol and then special access programs. I never got read into a SAP that was operating internationally. So I know that there are things out there I have no idea going on. But this is a big problem for Team Biden. And now they're switching out Ron Klain for Jeff Zients. What do you make of that move in the middle of an engulfing scandal?
I think it's a smart move, as a lot of folks that are more political in the administration go to the campaign side, assuming that Biden does announce he's running for re-election. Zients is, he's a manager. He's sort of a corporate exec type. He's less political, but he's probably a lot more moderate in his instincts than Ron Klain. But look, I think this is with all the crisis over the documents and classification, this is going to be an administration doing damage control for the next few months. So it'll test the new chief of staff's ability to play the Washington game, kind of get the there's going to be a lot of questions in the briefing room, and if they're not as forthcoming as they've been the last couple of weeks, it's going to be causing more problems for this one.
I'm going to ask you every week, Josh. I don't know if you ever wrestled. I didn't, but someone always has an advantage in every wrestling match. There's a wrestling match going on over the debt limit between the president and the House Republicans. Who's got the advantage right now? Who would you say is going to win that showdown?
Look, I think the Democrats overall have the advantage because they control the White House, and you have Republicans who are not on the same page. I actually reported about the Club for Growth role in Republican politics over the weekend at Axios, and it's clear that there are divisions within the Republican Party over how far to go and whether even to use the debt ceiling as leverage for this fight. But look, one of the big news developments over the weekend, Joe Manchin was on the Sunday shows, and he sounded like he sided with some of the Republicans in that the spending needs to be cut, and the White House cannot just say, we are not going to negotiate. And that was a big get for Republicans.
That is a big get. That I didn't see that, and that's a leverage shift, because right now the Biden White House has done a better job of communicating. We don't need no stinking negotiations, and the Republicans have got to say, Obama did it, you should well. Josh Kraushaar on Twitter at Axios. Always a pleasure to talk. Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt from Studio West. And this is the third hour of the program. Coming up at the bottom of the hour, Admiral Mike Nasty Manazer is joining me. His new book, Learn How to Lead to Win, is just fascinating. If you're a Top Gun pilot and a carrier commander, it stands to reason you've got some interesting stories to tell and leadership lessons to draw, and Admiral Manazer did. And we'll talk about that. But right now I'm joined by an old friend, Francesca Chambers, is the White House correspondent for USA Today. Francesca, how are you? I haven't seen you in a while.
I know. I was just thinking about that this morning. I think the last time that we saw each other, you asked me for a book report, actually. Should I prepare a book for this morning?
No, I'm going to ask you about your USA Today article. I see you all the time because you're in the White House press room. You're always there. You're always asking a good question. How many days a week are you in the White House press room, Francesca?
Well, I'm on a team of 5 at the White House, and so we rotate through those. So it just depends also with the president's travel to these days. But it's really great because the days when you're not there, you get to do some great reporting. Like I know we're going to talk about this morning, like my interview with Republican Governor Chris Sununu of New Hampshire. So best of both worlds.
Yeah. But the first thing I want to ask you, given that no one sees the whole picture of the White House press briefings except the White House press corps, and you only get to see the slices for you were there, have you heard anybody ask, Karine, has the president or Mrs. Biden or any entity related or run by them in connection to their properties received a grand jury subpoena that led to these searches? Have you heard the question of a grand jury subpoena anywhere from anyone?
I'm not sure if that has come up in the White House press briefing, but, there will be another one today, and you don't have to be a psychic Hugh to know that this is going to dominate the conversation. The Biden docs will again, and probably on Capitol Hill with senators and lawmakers coming back from recess as well. You saw even over the weekend that pretty much every single lawmaker was asked about the Biden docs, and a number of Democrats provided scrutiny and criticism of Biden's handling of the situation. So that would be my expectation for today.
But thus far, no one has asked anybody who could answer whether there is a, quote, precipitating event. I'm putting on my lawyer's hat here. There's a Hunter Biden grand jury. It's looking for information about Hunter Biden. It would not be extraordinary if they were to subpoena a place where he lived to do a document search on the grounds. And I think that's the most coherent explanation for the 4 searches. And now the FBI got involved in the last one, right? Francesca, you're keeping track. There have been so many different stories. Where are we now? How many documents, how many searches? How often has the FBI been there?
We're not sure of the exact number of documents that have been taken into custody by DOJ. So we'll start there. And then in terms of what the searches look like with the Department of Justice, we're told that this was voluntary. The Department of Justice says that it was both planned, that it was consensual. The search of President Biden's residence in Wilmington. He was in his Rehoboth Beach residence over the weekend. Previously, his legal team had said that there were no documents at that second home, the Rehoboth Beach home. And of course, the third location I believe you're referring to is the Biden Penn Center, where the initial documents were found as well. And so the House of Representatives, Republicans in the House Oversight Committee are also asking some of the questions that you're raising here, and they're trying to get answers from the White House. They've given several deadlines for those, the first of which is tomorrow. So at this point, we're waiting to see how the White House responds to that, if they do provide documents or communications surrounding this. We just don't know yet.
Yeah, I hope if you get the call, Francesca, just ask Karine, is there a subpoena in there somewhere? And then my second question, is there a 4th site? Because the Bidens moved out of a McLean house, and they couldn't have moved everything into the White House. You know what that's like. You've moved. There's got to be maybe it went to Wilmington, maybe it went to Bethesda, but the McLean house could not have fit into the White House, so they got to have sent it somewhere. Francesca, let's talk about Chris Sununu now, because I did see your story that the governor reaffirmed they are going first no matter what. Would you explain to people what that means and why you asked them that question?
Absolutely. So Democrats have put out a calendar for 2024, and it was put together by President Biden himself for what they want the primary calendar to look like. This was first passed by the rulemaking body of the Democratic National Committee. It has to be passed by the full Democratic National Committee to go into effect. That's expected to happen early next month during their Philadelphia meeting. However, the rulemaking body has already okayed this calendar. In this calendar, President Biden wanted South Carolina to go first, New Hampshire and Nevada to go second on the same day, and then he wanted Georgia, he wanted Michigan in that early window as well. So those are the 5 states. Sununu is saying New Hampshire is going to go first no matter what. Why does he have the authority to say that? Because New Hampshire has a state law saying it has to have the first primary, and it would be up to the state legislature, which is Republican run, and then the governor who would have to sign off on it to change that law. But he says no.
Well, I don't think they will. They make too much money. You've been up there in January, I assume, Francesca. I was in 2016 and in 1976. So I have been there twice, separated by a lot of years, and New Hampshire makes bank. This is vital to their national economy. They get everything out of it. There's no way they're not going to go first. So what's the DNC going to do? Are they going to force a showdown and penalize New Hampshire Democrats for holding the first in the nation primary?
Well, the sanctions that they had already passed says yes. Indeed, it says that President Biden couldn't appear on the ballot in New Hampshire during the primary if they go out of order without being penalized. But when it comes down to how stiff those sanctions actually are, it more or less means that New Hampshire wouldn't, on the floor of the Democratic National Convention, be able to vote for Joe Biden. But if he's not contested, if he's the nominee anyway, right, it's not going to matter that much if New Hampshire is unable to vote for him on the floor. On the other hand, by the way, Joe Biden could also split the difference here and say, well, I was the one who wanted New Hampshire to go second, right? The Democrats say they wanted greater diversity, and that's part of the reason why they had South Carolina going first. He could choose to appear on the ballot. He could choose to campaign in the state of New Hampshire and just, take the sanction.
Yeah, Francesca, I don't know if anyone talked to them about how stupid this is for the general election. New Hampshire is a purple state. It just reelected Chris Sununu and it just reelected Maggie Hassan. Split ballot down. It's up for grabs. It's a jump ball. All the Democrats are doing is ticking off the independents in New Hampshire because they're going to cost them money. Did they talk about that?
That was one of the cases that New Hampshire made, and part of the reason that this decision was delayed. It was set for earlier in the year last year, and then it was pushed until after the midterm elections for some of the reasons that you just raised. However, Democrats feel very strongly that there's not great enough diversity in that early window, that the voters that make up their base weren't getting enough of a say. And so this is what the president has put forward here. And again, Democrats are inclined to accept the calendar that President Biden put forward in the states in the order that he would like them to go.
So, Francesca Chambers, you watch very closely. Any doubt in your mind that Joe Biden is running for president?
Well, Democrats see what we're talking about as evidence that he is. That that he put forward the primary calendar that he wanted to have here. And as we talk about when he could announce his reelection bid, again, Democrats will be meeting February 2nd through 4th to approve this primary calendar. He has his State of the Union on February 7th. So there's an order of events here that would precipitate an announcement. So I'll be watching in that period after those two events for a reelection announcement.
So my last question, LBJ got Johnsoned in New Hampshire. He still won, but he got banged up by Eugene McCarthy and he withdrew in 1968. Is there any Democrat who's going to brave the DNC list and put their name on the ballot in New Hampshire to run against Joe Biden that you know of?
Democrats don't expect a major serious challenger to Joe Biden, New Hampshire, but one scenario that both Republicans and Democrats have put forward for me related to this calendar is if some minor candidate, there's always some folks who just say that they're running for president who aren't nationally known and put their names on the ballot. So one risk that he does run here is if he plays ball with the DNC, his calendar and he doesn't appear on the ballot in New Hampshire, is you could have one of those minor party candidates who ends up winning the state of New Hampshire. And Democrats are a little bit worried about what that will look like, what that says, kicking off his more or less his reelection campaign.
They should be. Francesca Chambers of USA Today. Follow on Twitter at Fran_Chambers. It is always good to see you. Thank you for joining me this morning on the Salem News Channel as well. Francesca Chambers. Boy, she's smart. I hope she's going to watch that briefing today.